What happened at Manassas that first year is that I got taught by an 18-year-old kid from the hood that if I'm going to be successful as a coach and a mentor and a father and in any other aspect in the world is I've got to be motivated not by what that work does for me, but by what that work does for everybody surrounding me. And then the payoff is you get 100 times more out of that than what you put into it.
Well, Coach Bill Courtney, I can say this is the first time I'll be having a conversation with an Oscar winner. So this is the beauty of this podcasting medium is you get access to some people you probably never would in your life. And so I know that there's so much more to you than just that, but I wanted to put that out there right away. This is an honor for me to have this conversation with you and to have you share with our audience from the many facets of who you are and what you've done, but really with the end goal of helping our audience, figure out how they can be the best that they can be in their lives with their family. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Can you start by maybe just, for those who don't know Coach Bill Courtney, tell us more about Coach Bill Courtney.
I'm a normal dude. I grew up in Memphis, went to Ole Miss, graduated from Ole Miss, and started coaching football and teaching school for a living. The way I grew up, my father left home when I was 4. He actually died this year, and
Sorry.
I had absolutely no relationship with him. My mom was married and divorced 5 times. My 4th father shot at me down a hallway when I had to dive out a window to save myself that night. And he shot up the house, and I called the police from a neighbor's house, and she was cowered in a corner in the attic. So, the truth is, in keeping with the story of your podcast, is fatherlessness has played a huge role in my life. When I graduated from Ole Miss, I started teaching school and coaching football. I had a degree in psychology. And my goal was to go into developmental psychology, be a child psychologist. But I met, you can look at me and see that, guys like me don't usually marry hot women. And I got lucky. And in the South, there's a thing when you're fishing called lighting into a slab. And that means if you're on an 8-pound test and you hook about a 15-pound bass, you do everything you can to get that thing in the boat without snapping the line and letting it get away. Well, that's kind of what I felt like when I married Lisa. Is I was the 8-pound test and she was the 15-pound slab. And so I didn't know what to do to keep her on the line except have kids. So we had 4 kids in 4 years, make sure she stayed around. And, as much as coaching has been my passion, primarily because you heard the way I grew up, the most positive influences in my life coming up were my coaches. They were I don't want to overdo it and say my coaches were my father figures, but they were the positive male influences in my life that counterbalanced so much of the negativity surrounding my fatherlessness. And so I had all these kids and this wife, and I had $17,000 a year teaching school and coaching football, wasn't getting it done. So that's how I got into the private world and started a business and all that. In the state of Tennessee, the governing scholastic athletic body allows people, if they take a bunch of classes and accreditation, to be what's called a non-faculty certified football coach. And so football coaching, or coaching period, basketball, football, whatever it was, has always been my passion. So even as I started into uh, a different profession other than teaching and coaching, it was still my passion. And so for 31 years, I continued to coach as the certified non-faculty coach while also growing my family and my business. My business now has 135 employees. We do business in 40 countries. I have office and manufacturing facility here in Memphis on about 50 acres. I have an office in Shanghai. I have an office in Ho Chi Minh. We've been very blessed and do a lot of business, but at the same time, I continued to follow my passion, which was coaching. And the opportunity came to coach at this inner city school and at called Manassas, and I moved over there when I started my business. Was there 7 years. The 7th year was captured by some guys that said they wanted to make a movie, and of course that sounded ridiculous. And 2 years later, I was walking down the red carpet at the Academy Awards. From that, I do speeches, and I wrote a book called Against the Grain, which led to more speeches. And so kind of the movie and the book and the speeches all evolved into a podcast that we've just launched called An Army of Normal Folks. And so I think that is the Reader's Digest 4-minute version of Bill Courtney from 4 years old till today.
Wow. Well, so much intrigue just in that 4-minute version. And there's probably so many points along the way I would love to dig into. But since this is a fatherhood show, the first thing that stands out to me is that early experience that you had. Your father leaving home at 4 and then having these 4 or 5 other,
4 that were married. There were a couple of other guys that were long relationship. Listen, I want to be careful. My mother loves me and always did, and I love her, and she did the best she could. She made some poor choices, and I don't want to throw her under the bus at all, but the fact is, fatherlessness and the reality of my upbringing and all had a very traumatic effect on me. And I'm 54 now, and I didn't really come to terms with all of it until my late 40s. And I lettered in 6 sports in high school. And my father was the starting point guard and the starting quarterback at East High School in Memphis, which back in the day was the school in Memphis. Sybil Shepherd actually graduated from there. And he was a track guy too. And I know you look at me now and are surprised, but I was as well many pounds ago. And he, until the 90s, still held some city and state records. He was a really good athlete, and I know he was into athletics. He went on to do very well in business, although I never saw anything from it. But I know he was interested in sports. And when you letter in 6 sports in high school, your name's in the local paper. There's no doubt in my mind that he saw or knew, we share the same name, that in reading the sports page, he was plenty aware of who I was and what I was doing, and yet never saw me play or participate in one single game or event. And when you're a strapping young guy at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and you're dealing with what people that age deal with anyway, trying to figure themselves out and everything else, and you've had all these guys in and out of your life that you reconcile you're not important enough for them to stay around. And then your own father, who shares common interests with you and who knows what you're doing, has no interest in you. What you start to do when you look at the mirror is ask yourself, what's wrong with you? You start to say, what is so wrong about me that no man finds me valuable enough to invest time and effort and care in me? And so you start to develop all of these insecurities, this anger, this self-doubt, there's self-hatred. Um, and it's traumatic, and it takes a long time to get over. And in a lot of cases, it leads to divorce and fatherlessness. It becomes a perpetual recurring cycle. And so when you look at kids from the inner cities of urban areas all over our country, just like the kids I coached at Manassas, which is chronicled in the movie Undefeated, and you wonder and you talk about this societal ill we have of fatherlessness and sometimes third and fourth generation perpetual misery in many of our disenfranchised and poverty-stricken inner cities. There's lots of systematic issues and social issues going on there, but at the root of many of them are fatherlessness and broken homes. And we ask ourselves, why? What do we got to? Well, I'm telling you, I'm a living example of, I can speak to trauma when it's buried alive will always resurface.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. When you describe, that experience for you, you describe for me, the aspect of asking that question, what's wrong with me? As you're growing up, somehow, some way you were able to move through that though. You said the coaches you had were positive influences and you were able to break that cycle. And so maybe could you spend a little bit of time talking about it? There's the breaking the cycle I'd love to talk about. But then the other part you mentioned was, I didn't come to terms with my fatherlessness experience until I was in my late 40s. So you were already achieving things. You were moving forward. You were doing things, yet you still hadn't come to terms with it. So could you talk maybe first about the breaking? Well, I'll let you decide. You go wherever you want to take it, but those are the two things that stand out to me as really important.
I'll answer your questions. For me, it was having a compass, and my compass is Lisa.
Hold on. What about before you met Lisa? Or was she coming into your life?
I married Lisa when I was 23.
Okay.
So
pretty young.
Yeah. So, and we started having kids immediately. Again, keep her in the boat. And so, um, up until 23, I had not dealt with it at all and was struggling with all kinds of stuff. Now, look, I was successful in college and did all these things, but underneath all of that facade, and honestly, maybe look, I lettered in 6 sports in high school. I was president of my fraternity. I was a columnist with the Daily Mississippian. I played football and soccer in college. I was involved in lots of things, and a lot of that energy was, looking back on it now, me probably still trying to prove my worth, my value. I was driven by a lot of probably things that shouldn't have driven me. But I married Lisa. We had these kids. And when I was in my 30s, and it was Father's Day, and she said, "Do you realize every Father's Day and most holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff, you're just a jackass?" And I'm like, "Well, no." And she said, "You are. You're miserable, and you're miserable to be around."
Mm,
Um, and she obviously knows me intimately more than anybody else. And she said, "Look, I know you're suffering inside, and you still
mm,
hadn't figured it all out." And she said, "But there's got to come a time where you quit being a victim of fatherlessness and um, start celebrating fatherhood. You
mm,
you have 4 delicious, beautiful children who adore you. You have an organic family and a wife who loves you and will support anything you do. It is time that you let that go and start celebrating, not instead of being a victim, not having a father, start celebrating being a father, and let that define who you are instead of the past define who you are." And by the way, you also need to understand that forgiveness is more important for the forgiver than the forgiven. And
mm,
even though you haven't been asked for forgiveness, you need to give it, because harboring all of that ill will and emotion is eating you up from the inside. And so, how I dealt with it and started to get over it, and am really now at peace with all of it, candidly, was, I think we all need to have 1 or 2 people in our lives that know us intimately, that we trust well enough to share everything with, that love us enough, that will support us in all of our endeavors, but also when we're wrong, love us enough to point it out, that we trust enough to listen to. And I call those people compasses.
mhm,
And Lisa's my compass, and she helped point out to me how I was allowing other people who who made poor decisions and affected me. I was allowing them to take my power as a positive human being and a father and a husband away from me. And so um, that was that was kind of how I started working through it, was listening to my compass and starting to forgive and starting to have grace and starting to understand that we all have trauma. We all have different problems in our life. And you can either choose to allow yourself to be a victim, or you can forgive, let it go, and start celebrating, working on the things that you can accomplish in life. And that was, instead of not be having a father, that was in fact being a father.
mm.
Um, so I don't know what your second question was.
Well, yeah, the first part was breaking the cycle.
That's
Um,
it. That's how I broke it.
God, so having a compass, having somebody who could speak truth in a loving way, and you were able to receive that and then start to do the work yourself
That's it.
to work through it.
That's how it worked for me. And
Yeah.
and understanding, very important part, understanding that forgiveness is more important for the forgiver than the forgiven. Man, if you harbor all kinds of ill will, if you harbor all kinds of this stuff inside of you, it's not hurting the person you're angry at, it's hurting you. You got to get rid of it. You got to forgive and you got to let it go. Now, there's a difference in forgiveness and a pardon, but you still got to forgive it. You got to let it go. You got to let it out. If you let it eat you up from the inside, you're allowing someone else to affect you over and over and over again. And you just got to quit. And so I had to get my arms around that too, which I did.
Do you think that that was affecting you as a dad in
Oh,
your own fatherhood? And then what change did you start to notice when you began to work on that?
well, I mean, I started, well, first of all, when Lisa said you're being a butthole, and I'm like, you know, uh, women.
Come on, you got to
And,
keep her in the boat.
yeah, that's right. Be careful. But then I started to, once I got over, you know, normal defensiveness that any human being has when they're told something about themselves they don't want to hear, um, I started to notice she was right. And, um, that's when you got to look yourself in the mirror and take an honest appraisal of who you are and what's going on because of your compass. And you start to work on it. And, how ironic would it be if, in trying to never be like the people who hurt me the most, I ended up being that person because I was harboring all this crap. I mean, you just got to forgive, you just got to let it go, and you got to work on yourself, and you got to be honest with yourself, and you got to listen. And so that's kind of how it worked for me. My coaches coming up were the vast majority of them were extremely good men and had a positive effect on my life. And so it wasn't like I was out there in the wind floundering. What I was conflicted, struggling. I had the good, I had the bad, and I was letting the bad outweigh the good. And anytime you do that, you're impeding your own progress as a human being. And so, you got to forgive, you got to listen, and you got to be honest with yourself, and then you got to work on it. And so, in terms of being a father, um, that's what I did. I want to tell you a story, but I have to give you a prerequisite. Lisa always had the four kids and me at dinner. And after working all day and coaching football and coaching the kids and everything else, sometimes we wouldn't eat till 8:30 at night, but we were going to have a family dinner.
Okay.
And my 7th year at Manassas, the Thursday night before the Friday game of the first playoff game, I looked at everybody and I said, guys, I really want you to come to the game tomorrow night. And, after 7 years, they came to a lot of games, but they had other stuff going on too. And they all looked at me and said, well, we'll come if we can, but what's the big deal? And I'm like, well, it's the playoffs. If I lose, I'm out. That's it. And they said, well, there's next year. Well, at that point, I'd not told anybody I wasn't going back to Manassas.
Mm.
And and I said that's when I broke the news. I said, guys, I'm not going back next year. And I said, so if we lose the game, I'm out, and it will be the last game I ever coached at Manassas, and I would like y'all to be there if that's the case. And I look over and at that time my third kid was 9, Will, and I look over, Will, he's right there on my left, and he's bawling.
Mm.
He just, tears are streaming down his face. And I said, son, what's wrong? And he said, you can't quit Manassas. And I said, why? He said, because those kids need you more than we do.
Wow.
And I'm going to tell you something. If you're engaged in any activity that somehow creates this perverted belief in your own children that other kids need you more than they do, you've got it wrong.
Mm.
I don't care how much good you're doing. I don't care how hard you're working. I don't care I don't care what you're accomplishing. If your children somehow think that their need for you is secondary to somebody else's need for you, you are out of balance. And so part of the answer to how I, um, started to work on becoming the best version of myself as a father is forgiveness. Have a compass, listen to your compass, take a self-appraisal of who you are, take steps that you need to take steps to change it based on the basic tenets and fundamentals that we all really know are supposed to define our life, but also listen to your children, love your
Mm,
children, understand that their perspective, although it may be an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old perspective, is through the lens of someone who likely almost worships you. And listen, because children are incredible mirrors of what's good and bad in the adults around them. But you got to shut up and listen and allow them to um, allow them to reveal to you what
mhm.
they're seeing. And what my son revealed to me is that despite all of the work I'd been doing, I was still missing the mark. And so, if there was anything that verified my decision to leave Manassas that last year, it was my son in that conversation.
Mm. Wow, that's powerful story. I can picture just the scene, right, and the family being there and asking that question and having him say that. It also reminded me when he said, when that happens, you're out of balance." It reminds me of a quote from I read years ago from Andy Stanley. It said basically, "Every other leadership position in the world can be replaced, but no one can replace you as a father in your child's life." And so it just speaks to the importance and the magnitude of your role in your own family first, even though you are obviously, as your son said, these kids need you more. And obviously you are a powerful role and influence in many young men's lives as a coach. And I have a sports background. I played sports as well. I played football as well. And I had my coach was actually inducted into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame as a college coach, which is rare. And so he was a powerful coach for sure. And so I can understand that, the importance and value of that. But you know uh, that is obviously, I'm curious, what did that do to you in that moment when your son said that?
Oh, it addressed me.
Hmm.
I felt like a loser. I mean,
Wow.
I was like, did so my kids are actually willing to take a back seat to other children because I've convinced them that the work I'm doing is more important than them. I've perverted my children's expectations of what their father should be for them. I'm supposed to be their protector. I'm supposed to be their provider. I'm supposed to be their confidant. I'm supposed to be their mentor. I'm supposed to be the person that is there first and foremost and always. I'm supposed to be exactly what no man ever was for me. And in and somehow my own children were suffering through some of the same things I was suffering from
Mhm.
because even though I was physically present, I wasn't present in all of the ways I should be. And it was clear through out of the mouths of babes, right? It was clear through his comment that I was failing.
Mm.
My business, I took a business with $17,000 and we're doing 60 million a year in sales. I took a team with 17 kids who'd won 4 games in 10 years and turned it into a perennial powerhouse with 75 kids. And our last 2 records were 18 and 2. They were making a movie about me. I mean, I was successful, right? But my own children were confused about what my role in their life was supposed to be because of the actions I'd been taking. I felt like a failure. That's what it did to me. And boy, it was a wake up call. And I mean, I changed a lot after that.
Hmm. Okay. Well, maybe back it up for us. I'm curious, what got you to the point where you'd made that decision that it was time for you to step away?
Well, so I started my business in 2001. I started at Manassas at 2002, and it was 2009. Um, anybody who's ever started a business, especially we're in the hardwood lumber business, and we're a manufacturer. So it's asset laden, lots of labor. We do business, like I said, all over the world. And it's hard. And I mean, to be successful, you only have to work half the day. Doesn't matter if it's the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours, right? So I'm working literally 10, 11, 12 hours a day, including Saturdays. And then going and coaching football 3 hours a day. And that was for 7 years. And my children were starting to get into the age where they're about to get into middle school and high school. And Lisa had done an amazing job keeping the house together and the children together and everything else to enable me to build the business and to also continue to pursue my passion of coaching football. But it was wearing on her. The time was wearing on our family, and it was just really apparent that I needed to step away and coach at my kids' school and coach in my kids' environment and all of that. And so it was just time, and I felt it. And of course, Lisa and I talked about, you need to be present for your children and things like that. And it started 2 years before, which I didn't want to hear. And then I started listening more and more, but it was just, it was time. It was just a lot of work on a lot of fronts, and it was time. And, my kids were athletic and active, and the opportunity to actually transition over to coach in their school and all of that was available to me. And so it was just time.
Mm. Well, I mean, thank you so much for, giving us a look behind the scenes of, your life and your family and, the struggles, the challenges, but ultimately the decisions that have driven you to, lead at home, right? You've been leading elsewhere, being successful, as you said, but there was something that, it wasn't there, and you made that important decision. I think there's many dads or men who can relate to that, right? They're driven, they're goal oriented, they're working hard, they're pursuing their passions, they're exploring, they've got people, but somehow, some way that there might be something, as you said, you just felt it wasn't quite right. And so if anyone's listening and you hear this story and that anything resonates for you, then take it from Coach Bill's insight or his hindsight that there might be something for you to do in terms of at home with your family that's going to make that big difference for your children and for your family. All right, thank you for joining me on this captivating journey into the life and insights of Coach Bill Courtney. Learning about his upbringing and the challenges he's faced is truly an inspiration, and for me, it's been an honor to help uncover the remarkable layers of his story, from that challenging upbringing and his growth into a husband, father, and coach. But there is more, because this was part one of my conversation with Coach Bill Courtney. And if you found this episode as inspiring as I did, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Help us at the Dad Central Show spread the word by rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback really does fuel our mission to bring you more stories that resonate and uplift. And don't worry, this conversation with Coach is far from over. In part 2, we dive into his coaching journey, really exploring the critical parts of the Oscar-winning documentary Undefeated. So get ready to be inspired by the power of mentorship and the profound moments that shaped his coaching and his leadership philosophy. Now, before I sign off, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our sponsor, Dove Men Plus Care. They believe in the importance of care for ourselves, our families, and the communities that we're part of. Just like Coach Courtney's commitment to mentorship and leadership, Dove Men Plus Care stands for values that truly matter. So stay tuned for part 2 of the conversation with Coach Bill Courtney on the Dad Central Show. Until then, remember to give yourselves grace. Don't just manage your time, manage your energy. We'll catch you in the next episode.